If you are a spiritual seeker, you've likely come across the term dark night of the soul. Yet, many seekers are unfamiliar with its original meaning, as conceptualized by St. John of the Cross, who was the first to introduce this term. In a previous video on this channel, I delved into the contemporary interpretation of the phenomenal experience known as the dark night of the soul. You can find a link to that video in the upper right corner as well as in the video description below. Today, our focus shifts to the original and traditional meaning of this experience, exploring it within the context of the soul's developmental stages as depicted by its originator. Few Christian mystics have been as influential as St. John of the Cross, born in 1542 in Spain. His penetrating spiritual insights continue to resonate with seekers of divine truth. St. John, a Carmelite friar, was influenced by the teachings of St. Teresa of Avila. She was a fellow mystic and member of the Carmelites. Both believed that the order drifted away from its original contemplative ideals. Many Carmelite monasteries of the time had become preoccupied with worldly matters. Instead of seeking divine truth, they lost themselves in distractions. St. John believed that these obstacles stood in the way of sacred union. One of the obstacles was being too attached to spiritual consolations, such as feelings of joy and ecstasy. Those feelings are a part of every spiritual journey, but St. John felt that they shouldn't be sought out for their own sake, which is what some people were doing. He believed members should be willing to undergo periods of spiritual desolation. He thought this was the best way to break free from attachment to these feelings. When there aren't any spiritual consolations, the soul is compelled to seek God for His own sake. To address his concerns, St. John worked with St. Teresa of Avila to reform the Carmelite order. The two sought to return the order to its original focus by bringing back spiritual practices that had fallen into disfavor, including prayer, self-denial, and detachment from desires. St. John's most significant contribution to mystical thought is the dark night of the soul, which arose from his collaborations with St. Teresa. It is an idea essential to his writings and is written about in his most famous work, The Dark Night. Seekers undergoing the dark night of the soul typically feel as if God has abandoned them because they can't feel His presence. That's because there are no longer any spiritual consolations. But the darkness merely strips away all that which is not God, thus allowing the soul to experience a more profound connection with its Creator. St. John describes it as spiritual marriage. The dark night isn't something experienced by everyone, but for those who do, their relationship with God deepens beyond anything they could ever imagine. Some people believe St. John was a masochist in love with pain and sorrow. Nothing could be further from the truth. He showed us that the dark night is sometimes the best way to achieve unification with the divine. Of course, this is the goal of all spiritual practices. St. John of the Cross talks about two kinds of dark nights. First, there is the dark night of the senses. This is when God helps an individual to let go of their attachment to worldly pleasures. That way, all desires interfering with divine union are removed. Second, there is the dark night of the spirit, where a seeker experiences profound inner darkness. It happens after the purification process is complete. The seeker yearns to be one with the divine with every fiber of their being, but they can't feel God's presence no matter how hard they try. Spiritual purification is an intense journey where a soul is cleansed of all unhealthy desires. This process demands utter separation from everything except the divine. This purification process assumes two forms, active and passive. Active purification is everything you do to free yourself of worldly desires. On the other hand, passive purification is where you allow God to complete the work you started in yourself. St. John believed that the second part of this process was necessary because a soul can't reach complete perfection through its own efforts. Only God can do that. Having understood the two kinds of dark nights, the dark of the senses and the dark night of the soul, Each one is further divided into the two types of the purification process. Thus, we end up with 4 stages: the active night of the senses, the passive night of the senses, the active night of the soul, and the passive night of the soul. Let's now explore each one separately. The active night of the senses. The active night of the senses is the first stage of the dark night. Its purpose is to unshackle you from the chains of sensual pleasures. It requires your deliberate participation. You must deny yourself your usual delights to make space for the divine. This can be a painful and challenging process. After all, it's not easy to relinquish addictions that have become part of who you are. At the beginning of our journey, we're hooked on the fleeting thrills of worldly attachments. These are things like money, alcohol, and food. And while these things provide temporary pleasure, they're spiritual stumbling blocks. That's because they're poor substitutes for divine joy. A pleasure seeker only lives for the moment, on a never-ending quest for the next thrill to fill their inner void. But these people only lead a superficial existence. If you're only chasing earthly pleasures, you're missing out on the profound ecstasy of living in God's presence. God wants you to enjoy life, but He wants your pleasure to be of the highest order, the rapture of becoming one with the divine. An attachment to a pleasure results from habitually choosing that which you desire. Think about someone hooked on heroin. That's an attachment formed through repeatedly giving in to the craving. The same goes for any other attachment. You become attached to material wealth when you succumb to the appetite for money over and over. This insatiable appetite leaves you wanting more with no end in sight. A voluntary action is one you make freely, but once a habit forms, your actions aren't voluntary anymore. Like that person on heroin, they're not choosing freely when they take the drug. You can always work to break habitual attachments. When you cleanse your soul of an attachment, you're freed from what held you back. There is more to this stage of the journey than freeing yourself of attachments. To fortify yourself for what comes next, establish a consistent contemplative practice such as prayer or meditation. This provides you with a sacred space to commune with the divine and seek guidance. You also need to engage in spiritual study and exploration. Dive as deep as you can into the teachings and wisdom of mystics and saints by reading spiritual texts. These books will help you gain deeper insight into your spiritual journey, and because your journey is difficult, you'll need all the help you can get. The passive night of the senses. In the passive night of the senses, the seeker no longer controls the purification process. Instead, God takes an active role in purifying the senses. He helps remove attachments to worldly pleasures we didn't even know we had, which is why we couldn't do it on our own. This final purification leaves us feeling empty inside. We wander through desolate inner landscapes, no longer feeling the divine joy we once had. This is when the soul, like a traveler in unfamiliar terrain, may momentarily lose its way. Feelings of abandonment can creep in, casting doubts on our divine relationship. Infinite darkness confronts us on all sides. Yet, it's precisely in this darkness that our faith is tested and strengthened. Here in the depths of the all-pervading darkness, we come to know the beauty of surrender and the enduring power of faith. The active night of the Spirit. In the active night of the Spirit, you work on breaking free from internal attachments. During this stage, meticulously examine every one of your thoughts and intentions. Get rid of all attachments, both external and internal. These include ego-driven desires and selfish tendencies. Let go of the need for spiritual feelings, such as rapture and ecstasy. Instead, focus on a pure and selfless love for the divine. Understand that the all-encompassing darkness is an integral part of this journey. Embrace it as an opportunity for growth and transformation. Remember that this journey is a test of your faith and commitment. Keep going even though you're besieged on all sides by challenges, doubts, and uncertainties. Let go of your desires and plans, and trust that God is guiding you toward a deeper union. The passive night of the spirit. The passive night of the spirit is the last step of the soul's journey towards becoming one with the divine. It's a gift bestowed upon those who faithfully travel the path of purification and surrender. St. John of the Cross describes it as the deepest and most secret part of the soul. The passive night brings divine illumination. Suddenly, the soul gains profound insights into spiritual truths and a deeper understanding of the mysteries of faith. The soul undergoes a radical transformation, becoming more Christ-like in its attributes. In the active night, the seeker detached from the need for spiritual consolations. But, in the passive night, the seeker typically has intense experiences of divine rapture and ecstasy. These moments sustain and strengthen the soul on its journey. Seekers may encounter mystical phenomena such as visions. These experiences are not sought after, but are bestowed by God's grace. In conclusion, the dark night of the soul is one of the most transformative experiences a seeker can have. It's a time of surrender, where unwavering trust in the divine plan replaces the need for understanding. As the soul confronts its imperfections, it's purged of everything standing in the way of union with God. As the seeker journeys through inner darkness, a powerful transformation unfolds. Every earthly desire and attachment is surrendered, thus creating a space for the radiant light of the divine to shine through. So, join us today, dear seeker, on a journey towards universal oneness. Even if you never undergo the dark night of the soul, you can glean valuable lessons from what we discussed in this video. In its profound teachings lies the wisdom to illuminate your own path. This knowledge will guide you towards a deeper understanding of the mysteries of existence.